Here at the Combine, very happy to be joined by Alex Marvez, SiriusXM NFL radio host and part of the announce team for the newly formed All Elite Wrestling, which certainly will be exciting as a lot of people in that industry talking. But here we are talking about football and, more importantly, the Browns. And Alex, when you think about what we would have talked about a year ago,
unbelievable,
and what we're talking about now, is this one of the craziest kind of turnarounds in the league?
I mean, and just, the proverbial tip of the cap to one John Dorsey. I mean, listen, obviously the Kareem Hunt situation is something that is, a source of controversy,
sure.
About the Browns, and he's going to have to prove that, he has dealt with his anger management issues and put this episode behind him in his life. But other than that, you go into an off-season, your quarterback position has been addressed. There's not a single starter now, with Greg Robinson agreeing to that one-year contract earlier this week, whose deal is up. So you have all 22 back from a team that went 7-8-1 and that nobody wanted to play at the end of the 2018 season. You have Freddie Kitchens as your coach, and that's the big question mark, is how does he make that transition from coordinator to head coach? But I think that he's assembled. Actually, John Dorsey did the most of the assembling behind the scenes, but put together a pretty darn good coaching staff, at least on paper. And I mean, Browns fans, you can feel excited about what's coming in 2019.
When you kind of take a step back and look at the AFC North as a whole, it's not only what the Browns are doing, it's kind of some of the turmoil and chaos that seems to be happening around them. But it's really setting up for an opportunity for the Browns to be in a great position in this division for a while, it seems.
Yeah, and what's interesting is now, is there a changing of the guard, so to speak? I mean, I think the Cincinnati Bengals now are the fourth team in the four-team division. I just feel like there's more storm clouds on the horizon with this franchise as Zach Taylor tries to, right some of the wrongs that happened toward the end of the Marvin Lewis era. With Pittsburgh, it's just uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right now, and what's going to happen with Antonio Brown? Where does he ultimately get traded? How do the Steelers replace him in that offense? Because it's not to slight Juju Smith-Schuster, but it's easier for Juju Smith-Schuster to catch passes when defenses are concentrating on taking Antonio Brown out of the game. So who's that other receiver? Is it James Washington that steps up for them? And listen, they still haven't addressed their secondary. And they've hired Terrell Austin, but what are they going to do defensive back wise, because they still were pretty porous in 2018. So some questions there about the Steelers team. The Ravens, it's Lamar Jackson now that the gimmick has been exposed, so to speak, right? To use some wrestling parlance.
Yes,
but
indeed.
But now that Lamar Jackson, the Chargers gave out a blueprint. This is how you attack this type of offense. You use 7 defensive backs, and Lamar was flustered. He had his worst game at a time where the Ravens needed him to play his best. How does he rebound from that? What does Greg Roman, who I'm a huge fan of, by the way, what does he do to get this Ravens offense to the next level, to get Lamar Jackson to the next level? We know that defense is good, but is Terrell Suggs going to be coming back? Are they going to be parting ways with Jimmy Smith, Eric Weddle, because they have a tough decision to make on C.J. Mosley and that franchise tag? So really, I mean, again, football, is a funny business. The Cleveland Browns, if they're predicted to win the AFC North, by the time all is said and done this offseason, I wouldn't flinch. I wouldn't blink.
I wouldn't either, and that's exciting to actually talk about that and not have it just be a theory or something that I dreamt while I was sleeping that night for it. It could be real, and you mentioned at the beginning, a lot of it has to do, obviously, with what John Dorsey's done, and the key piece of that, getting Baker Mayfield. What did you think of his rookie season and where he kind of can help lead this team?
I think the only thing that's frustrating about Baker's rookie season is, why didn't you play him earlier? Why wasn't he out there from week one? Why didn't Hugh Jackson allow him to legitimately compete for that starting job and just say, hey, or in fact, when you saw it. It was
an organizational decision at the time, but it was one of those things that's very surprising.
Organizational decision. I guess it was also organizational that Todd Haley decided not to incorporate plays from the Oklahoma playbook for Baker Mayfield to truly take advantage of him.
I would not expect.
No, it was a mess, and look, it was a setup for failure for everyone involved until finally, Hugh Jackson pulls the old end around, right, and tries to go to ownership and hangs himself and is out, as head coach, and that allowed Baker Mayfield to truly start to hit his stride, working with a coordinator in Freddie Kitchens, who he goes hand in hand with. I mean, and that's the great part about it. Listen, he's still not a finished product, and he took too many chances. You saw it in the 3 interception perform against the Ravens. He needs to be in Houston, but also against Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken, too. And he needs to be more judicious in how he throws. The risk that he's taking at this level. But that's okay. Your first-year quarterback. We can get through that. All the questions that we were dealing with at this time last year, is he the next Johnny Manziel off the field? Is he too short, to succeed? He played in a pass-heavy Oklahoma offense. Can he adjust to doing things in the NFL? They have all been answered in a big-time way. Baker Mayfield, the real deal, and the Browns are better off for it.
I certainly agree. That was very well said. Kind of like a little bit of a promo there on Baker Mayfield, and we like that. But I think the pairing, you hit on something, the pairing of Baker with Freddie Kitchens, as we were going through the offseason, and look, I obviously had full trust in whatever John Dorsey was going to do. I think he has demonstrated that what that guy wants to say, what he says goes. But I absolutely wanted Freddie Kitchens to be the next head coach of the Browns because I had the benefit of being on the sideline and seeing the relationship that he had with Baker and the love, the affinity that they had for each other, the kind of like-mindedness they had, and the realness that they both shared in who they are and the comfort with that. And I think, a lot of people said, how could this guy go from what he was? I mean, he's been in the league a long time, but Freddie, I think, will prove to be a tremendous leader for this organization.
Well, and they know him. You know what I mean? So John Dorsey knows him. He got to watch Freddie Kitchens every day. This wasn't like a blind hire like what the Bengals have done with Zach Taylor. I mean, Zach Taylor, the closest they came to him is he was an assistant coach at the University of Cincinnati. There's no history, so they're going to have to learn how Zach Taylor, does things, and are there things he can do to improve as a head coach in his first year. With the Browns, John Dorsey already knows this guy, and I think when all things were equal between Freddie Kitchens and Kevin Stefanski, you'd rather go with the guy you know than the guy you don't, and that's what helps separate Freddie Kitchens in this process. And but there are differences when you're a head coach. The X's and O's, and we'll see how he structures this organization. But a lot of time the X's and O's are like the third or fourth thing on your list, and it's not by choice, but you deal with a crisis in the locker room, right? You deal with all the media relations aspects of things, shaking hands, kissing babies, all that sort of stuff. Freddie Kitchens is going to have to manage time. He's going to have to delegate his authority, and he's going to have to reach both units. I mean, it isn't just, and I get it like in with the Rams and Sean McVay, oh yeah, he's the coach of the offense, and Wade Phillips is the coach of the defense. Well, yes and no. I mean, Sean still has to have the buy-in from the defensive players. Sure. That means having a presence on that side of the football. And that's, I think, Freddie Kitchens, one of the things this offseason is sort of going to be introducing himself to guys. Because believe it or not, as weird as it is with, 53 active players in the locker room and the guys on the practice squad, you spend more time with your position coaches than you do. And then your head coach. You're not really hanging out with the if you're an offensive player with the defensive coaches, you don't really get to know them too much. Yeah, a little bit of interaction, but this is really a time now this offseason with Freddie having his offense in already and now being able to fully install what it is that he wants to do. This is a great time for him to build those bonds with the defensive players and make sure that they're buying in to what it is that he wants to accomplish by the lake.
Yeah, to the Freddie Kitchens program. I want to ask you, just when you talk about this roster, you mentioned the starters are coming back, nobody's on contract, but at the same time, John Dorsey would tell you, I want to improve every single year. He's never going to be content, and certainly not with 7-8-1. What would you see are the biggest kind of needs on this roster to get this team to winning the AFC North?
Well, it's interesting. What type of trade equity does Duke Johnson have if they decide to make a move from him? How do you incorporate his skill set into what Freddie Kitchens is doing? I mean, Duke is a really talented player as a receiver out of the backfield, but, is it better off for your team to get, if a team offers a decent draft pick for him, do you move on from him? Greg Robinson, I mean, look, he won the job outright. Desmond Harrison, look, for him to go from West Georgia out of nowhere and to be able to compete and play some at left tackle, and Sean Coleman falls by the wayside along the way. I mean, Greg Robinson, starting those final 8 games was positive, but you could tell, too, it's not a complete buy-in for Greg Robinson. It's a 1-year, $7 million deal, and I think if the Browns are sitting there in the draft in the first round and there's still one of these top-tier left tackles on the board, I think it behooves you to take a look at drafting a left tackle and say, hey, look, Greg, this is your job. We can move this guy somewhere else, but, cover yourself. Just in case, because Austin Corbett, I think it's pretty
interior.
Clear. He's an interior guy at this point. So I look at that on offense. Defensively, I mean, look, poor Emmanuel Ogbah, right? You play opposite of Myles Garrett, and he's not Myles Garrett. So edge rushers have played such an important role in a defense. So I think that's an area that you'd continue to look. Cornerback, I think another area you continue to look. Linebacker-wise, is Jamie Collins coming back? I think that's a fair question. Under his current salary, that was a contract not signed by John Dorsey. Are you going to be looking to try to move on from him? And special teams, you're bringing in a kicker to compete. I know John Dorsey doesn't have any plans at the moment, but likely someone will be signed. But that's the wild thing about this. Like, it's not like I'm sitting here with this giant laundry list of things like we have in the past. John got so much done, through, great drafting, through smart free agent signings and taking advantage of some of the players who are already there, that I can't tell you there's this gaping hole on the Browns roster that needs to be filled with urgency in the offseason.
And I'll tell you, I think from last year, one of the moves that he made that I think was one of the absolute best was the trade that brought in Demarius Randall, because Demarius Randall brought legitimacy to the back end of this defense. I thought played at a Pro Bowl level, and you got him for Deshaun Kaiser, who, once you drafted Baker Mayfield, wasn't in your plans anyway. And I thought that move, and hopefully we'll see more of those things like that this offseason, but was just a tremendous move.
It was, and there was a plan. That was the thing. There was a plan, and the plan was executed. And that's just so much of it. And listen, it might have been despite Hugh Jackson that the plan was executed. And I'm not here to bury Hugh. He's done enough of that himself, and other people have done it. But the point is that John Dorsey had a vision for where he wanted to take this team. He wanted to clear out the quarterback room, all 3 quarterbacks gone, and Baker Mayfield able to obviously ascend to that starting spot. I just feel like John just knew what he wanted, and he recognized Demarius Randall, his skill set, what wasn't being used maybe the way that it should have been used in Green Bay, fit in with what Cleveland wanted. And again, that's a general manager who's in touch with his coaches. And, for example, Greg Williams, look, it would have made sense. Yeah, Bradley Chubb, right? Everyone says, oh, well, draft Bradley Chubb because pass rushers are such a premium. It was Greg Williams who told John, look, I need a corner. If I'm going to execute my defense properly, I could really use Denzel Ward, because the metrics for Denzel Ward, I mean, they were off the charts. I mean, you're talking like rare air last year. At the Combine last year, I saw his numbers, and they rated with some of the greatest cornerbacks to ever be drafted. I mean, that's how dominant he was at Ohio State, and you saw signs of that. Of course, stop leading with your head and getting concussed might help, Denzel Ward stay on the field. But my point is that this guy, it made sense. So when you have a group, and listen, and Dorsey could have just said, nah, Greg, we're going to go with the outside pass rusher, because when we look at, how the cap is, and we're going to be able to re-sign Myles Garrett, whatever the reasons are, you could have made excuses. He didn't. And he listened to his coaches, and even though Greg's not here anymore, but he still put him in position to succeed. And Greg Williams has reinvented himself now. You think about the success he had in Cleveland last year, and success as an interim head coach. While he never really had a shot at being the head coach in Cleveland. They were going to go in a different direction. But Greg is now back on the map when it comes to head coaching interviews. Yeah. Could we have said that 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago while he's suspended? So, I mean, everyone benefited from what happened in the second half of the season for the Browns.
Who doesn't want to see the Browns and the Jets Monday night, week 1 of the season? Freddie, Greg, Darnold, Baker, the whole deal. I think that'd be a great opening week game.
You're pitching this?
I'm pitching it.
That's
my sales pitch.
I like that. That would be a fantastic.
It'd be a great ESPN Monday night
fantastic
game. Let's go.
It's a perfect Monday night game. Although, we got the NFL anniversary stuff coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how old school we get with some of this stuff, and what are going to be some of those funky matchups. Like, for example, if you want to do a tip of the cap to the AFL, do you book all 4 AFC West teams against each other? And you have to get an earlier start in Denver, but you have Denver host one game, and then you could go with one of the other 3 to start off there. But you're going to see, probably the Patriots play Sunday night in defense of their title, and Chicago Green Bay looking like the likely Thursday night game as we celebrate the 100-year anniversary of this. And who knows, maybe year 100, the Browns get that first Super Bowl title.
Let's go, Alex. Thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
It was an honor. Thank you.